Dear soul, come close. Pull your awareness inward and away from every distraction that has been pulling at the edges of your concentration. Set down the weight of your daily thoughts, the unfinished business, the unanswered messages, the lingering anxieties, and step into this sacred space with me. The high heavens have parted the celestial veil this day, to speak directly into the core of your being, and what is being released in this message is not casual spiritual commentary. This is a verdict. This is a decree. This is a revelation that has been carefully timed by the divine intelligence that governs every star, every breath, and every beat of your heart. You must anchor your spirit deeply into the ground of stillness, because what you are about to receive is not gentle, it is not soft. It carries the weight of cosmic truth, and truth, in its purest form, can cut before it heals. You must stay with this message until the very last word, because the liberation that has been prepared for you is contained in its entirety. If you leave early, you will only carry half a key, and half a key opens nothing. So breathe, settle, and trust that whatever brought you here today was not an accident. The universe does not waste divine moments on unworthy souls, and you, despite everything you have been made to feel by the hands of small, envious, and spiritually impoverished people, are not unworthy. You are, and always have been, extraordinary. Now let us begin. Last night, while you were resting, while your body was surrendered to sleep, and your soul was hovering in the peaceful corridors, between waking and dreaming, a war was being fought on your behalf, on the physical plane, a war that you did not ask for, did not know about, and were not present to witness, a war that was ignited not by a stranger, not by an enemy on the outside of your life, but by someone who has been sitting at the table of your soulmate's family, eating the bread of belonging, while secretly sharpening a knife behind her back. Your soulmate had a massive, explosive, earth-shattering argument with their sister last night, and before you rush past that sentence, with a sympathetic sigh, or a gentle prayer for peace to be restored, I need you to understand the full depth of what that argument represented in the celestial timeline of your life. This was not a petty sibling squabble. This was not a moment of temporary friction that will dissolve by morning, when the coffee is brewing, and apologies are exchanged over breakfast. No. What happened last night was the culmination of months, perhaps even years, of spiritual tension that has been quietly building beneath the surface of every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every group conversation, and every moment where you were either present or discussed in your absence. The sister has been talking. She has been talking loudly, consistently, and with a deliberate, calculating intention to dismantle the way the world perceives you. She has been moving through social circles, through family networks, through mutual connections, and through the private messaging threads of people you may have smiled at, waved to, or considered acquaintances. She has been painting a portrait of you that is grotesque, distorted, and fundamentally dishonest. She has been telling anyone who would listen, with a confidence that borders on performance, that you are a total joke. Let that land for a moment, dear soul, not that you are misguided, not that you are imperfect, not that you have flaws or rough edges, like every other human being walking the face of this earth. She has been telling people that you are a total joke, a punchline, a source of ridicule. She has framed your existence in this relationship as something absurd, something embarrassing, something that right-thinking people ought to be laughing at, behind closed hands. She has appointed herself as the self-righteous narrator of your story, and the version of you she has been narrating is a caricature, stripped of your dignity, your depth, and your divine worth. And last night, your soulmate found out exactly how far she had taken it. Now I want you to understand something critical, before we go any deeper into this revelation, because I know that upon hearing this, your first instinct might be to feel ashamed, or to feel a wave of social anxiety crashing over you, as you mentally scan every person in that network, and wonder what they have been told, and what they now believe. I want you to stop that mental spiral right here and right now, because I am about to tell you a truth that the heavens have confirmed. None of those people hold any real authority over the trajectory of your life. Their opinions are not anchors. Their beliefs about you are not ceilings. The gossip that has been circulating in those small, limited, earthly spaces is nothing more than smoke, and smoke, no matter how thick it appears for a moment, always dissipates. But before we get to your liberation, we must get to the root, because a wound that is not examined is a wound that festers, and you deserve to understand exactly what has been operating in the shadows of your relationship from the very beginning. The sister did not like you. From the moment you entered the picture, not from the first introduction, not from the first family event, where you smiled warmly, and tried your best to make a good impression, not from the moment she watched her sibling's face transform in your presence into something more alive, more hopeful, and more peaceful than she had seen in years. In fact, it was precisely in that moment, that specific, sacred moment, when she witnessed the power of your influence on her sibling's heart, that something dark and ancient stirred within her. I am not telling you this to make you feel sorry for her. I am not inviting you to extend so much compassion that you minimize the damage she has done. I am telling you this so that you can see the full picture and understand that her hatred was never a verdict on your value. It was a diagnosis of her condition. She is a soul that has been living in a contracted state for a very long time. A soul that has learned to maintain its relevance and its sense of power, through control, through influence, and through being the central force in the lives of those around her. For years, perhaps for her entire life, she has occupied a particular role in her family dynamic, a role that gave her a sense of importance, a sense of being needed, a sense of being the one whose opinion matters most, whose approval is sought, whose disapproval carries consequences. She has been the gatekeeper of the family's emotional world, and she has grown comfortable, even addicted, to that role. Then you arrived, and everything changed. You did not arrive with fanfare, or with any intention of disrupting the existing order. You simply arrived as yourself, which is to say, you arrived as a high-frequency, authentically vibrating, deeply loving presence. And that presence alone was enough to shift the entire dynamic. Your soulmate began to grow in ways that surprised even themselves. They began to stand taller, to speak with more conviction, to make decisions from a place of genuine self-knowledge, rather than from the fear of family disapproval. They began, perhaps for the first time, to choose their own happiness without looking over their shoulder for permission. And she noticed the way you had awakened something in her sibling that no amount of family pressure had ever been able to touch. She noticed that her influence was no longer the dominant force in your soulmate's inner world. She noticed that when there was a decision to be made, a comfort to be sought, a joy to be shared, her sibling was turning toward you, rather than toward the familiar orbit of the family system she controlled. To a soul operating from insecurity and a need for dominance, This is not a beautiful love story. This is a threat. This is an invasion. This is the arrival of a force that has dismantled the carefully constructed hierarchy of influence that she has spent years building, and so she did what threatened, insecure, spiritually impoverished people always do. She went to war. Not openly, not honestly, not with the dignity of a direct confrontation, but in the shadows, through whispers, through carefully planted doubts, through the cowardly weapon of gossip. She called you a joke, because she needed to make herself feel powerful, in a moment when she was feeling profoundly powerless. She needed to create a version of you that the world would laugh at, because if the world was laughing at you, then maybe the soulmate bond you share would be seen as ridiculous too. If she could make people believe that you were beneath contempt, then perhaps your partner would feel the social pressure to distance themselves from you. Perhaps the relationship would crack under the weight of public ridicule and family disapproval, and she would get to slide back into her familiar position as the most important person in her sibling's life. That was the plan, and last night, it exploded in her face, because last night, your soulmate discovered the full extent of her campaign against you. They discovered the conversations she had been having, the things she had been saying, the people she had been influencing, and the shameless consistency with which she had been working to undermine your place in this relationship and in the wider community. And something ignited in your soulmate that she had never seen before, something fierce and protective, and absolutely unwilling to bend. They confronted her. They did not do it softly, or diplomatically, or with the careful emotional management that family members are often expected to deploy when navigating sensitive interpersonal territory. They did it with fire. They did it with the full force of someone who has reached the absolute limit of their tolerance for watching the person they love be dragged through the mud by someone who is supposed to be family. They raised their voice in a way they rarely do. They drew lines in a way they never have before. They told her, in terms that left no room for misinterpretation, that what she had been doing was not acceptable, not forgivable without genuine accountability, and not something they were willing to continue overlooking in the name of keeping the peace. She responded predictably, by escalating, by doubling down, by throwing every piece of ammunition she had been hoarding in the arsenal of her grievances against you. She said things in that argument that revealed the full measure of how deeply she has resented your presence in this family. She exposed herself completely, the way a person does when they are finally cornered, and they have nothing left to lose, except the mask they have been wearing. And in doing so, she made the most catastrophic mistake of her life, because in that moment of full, unmasked exposure, your soulmate saw her clearly, perhaps for the very first time, not as the older or younger sibling whose approval had always carried weight, not as the family member whose opinion had always been factored into major decisions, but as a person who had been operating from a place of jealousy and manipulation, using the sacred trust of family loyalty as a cover for something deeply unloving. The scales fell from their eyes in real time, and what they saw underneath was not someone deserving of deference, but someone who needed to be firmly and permanently held accountable. Now, dear soul, let us speak about you, and what all of this means for your journey. You have likely been sensing, for some time now, that something was off in that family dynamic. There have probably been moments where you felt a coldness from her, that she dressed up as formality. moments where you caught a flicker of something in her eyes that contradicted the pleasantness of her words. Moments where you left a family gathering, feeling vaguely diminished, vaguely unsettled, vaguely, as though you had been the subject of a conversation that you were never meant to overhear. You probably questioned those feelings. You probably told yourself that you were being too sensitive, too quick to see darkness, where perhaps there was only difference in personality. Do not ever doubt your spiritual discernment again. Those feelings were not paranoia. They were not the projections of an insecure mind. They were the direct transmissions of your intuitive guidance system, your soul's built-in alarm, alerting you to the presence of hidden hostility in your environment. Every time you sensed something, and then talked yourself out of it, your guardian angels were watching with a gentle, patient sorrow, knowing that the full truth would eventually reveal itself, and trusting that when it did, you would be ready to receive it. You are ready now. That is why this message has found you today, and here is what the heavens want you to know about the spiritual mechanics of what has been happening. When a soul of low vibration launches a campaign of slander against a soul of high vibration, the cosmos does not simply observe neutrally. The universe is not indifferent to the abuse of its own laws. The spiritual law of resonance dictates that every word, every action, and every intention carries a frequency, and that frequency returns to its source. When she spoke words of malice and contempt about you, she was not simply releasing them into a neutral void, she was setting in motion a cosmic boomerang. And the trajectory of that boomerang has been curving back toward her since the moment the first poisonous word left her lips. Every conversation in which she characterized you as a joke was a conversation that, to a spiritually attuned observer, characterized her as bitter, jealous, and small. Every time she attempted to lower your standing in someone else's eyes, she unknowingly lowered her own. People may have nodded along in the moment, as people often do when they are being fed gossip by a confident and persuasive speaker. But in the quiet of their own reflection, many of them registered the energy behind her words. Many of them sensed the rancor beneath the performance of concern. Many of them walked away from those conversations, not thinking less of you, but thinking significantly less of her. This is the invisible work of divine justice. It does not always announce itself loudly or immediately. It does not always arrive in the dramatic, visible form that our human desire for vindication craves, but it is always working. The celestial ledger is never miscalculated. Every debt of injustice is recorded, and every account is eventually settled, not by your hand, not through your intervention, not as a result of any revenge or retaliation on your part, but through the impeccable, self-correcting intelligence of the universe itself. And while she was busy attempting to diminish you, the universe was simultaneously doing something extraordinary on your behalf. It was using her very actions as the instrument of your elevation. Every accusation she leveled against you was a hammer that was actually building your foundation, not destroying it. Every attempt to make you look small was a force that was actually pushing your soulmate deeper into your corner, more committed to your bond, more awake to the preciousness of what you share, and the necessity of protecting it. She thought she was weakening your relationship. She was actually forging it into something unbreakable. She thought she was creating distance between you and your partner. She was actually eliminating every last millimeter of ambivalence, and replacing it with the diamond-hard clarity of a person who has been forced to choose, and has chosen without hesitation. Your soulmate chose you. In the heat of one of the most emotionally charged moments of their life, with the full pressure of family loyalty and sibling history bearing down on them, they chose you. They stood in the fire, and they did not flinch. They looked at someone they have loved their whole life, and told that person, with their full voice and their full heart, that speaking against you was not something they were willing to tolerate. That is not a small gesture. That is not a routine declaration. That is a soul showing you, through action rather than words, where their deepest allegiance lies. Now I want to speak to the part of you that is perhaps feeling a complicated mixture of emotions as you process all of this. Perhaps there is a part of you that feels a twinge of guilt, as though the argument last night is somehow your fault, as though your presence in this family system has been a source of disruption and pain. I want to address that feeling directly and without gentleness, because it does not deserve gentleness. It deserves to be firmly and clearly dismantled. You did not cause this conflict. You did not create the sister's insecurity. You did not manufacture her jealousy or plant her malice or script her gossip. You simply existed, authentically and lovingly, and her own inner darkness did the rest. The conflict that erupted last night is not a consequence of your presence. It is a consequence of her character. You are not responsible for the chaos that jealousy creates in the lives of those who choose to host it. That responsibility belongs entirely to her, and you must not spend a single moment of your precious energy trying to repair a relationship with someone who has demonstrated, through months of deliberate and sustained action, that they do not wish you well. There are people in this world whose opposition to you is not a misunderstanding that can be corrected through enough kindness, enough patience, or enough effort on your part. Sometimes opposition is rooted in something that lives so deep in a person's psyche that nothing you do on the surface will ever reach it. This is one of those situations. She has made her position abundantly clear, and the most self-respecting, self-loving, and spiritually aligned response to that clarity is to accept it and adjust your behavior accordingly. Stop sending the thoughtful messages. Stop going out of your way to be warm and inclusive. Stop dimming your own light in her presence, in the hope that a softer glow will make you less threatening to her. Stop performing graciousness for an audience that has already decided. The performance is a farce. None of those behaviors have been working, and none of them will work, because the issue was never with your behavior. The issue is with her perception, and her perception is filtered through a lens of envy that you cannot polish away, no matter how hard you try. What you can do, and what the heavens are commanding you to do right now, is to simply and completely be yourself without apology. Let your light be as bright as it naturally is. Let your love be as full and as free as it naturally flows. Let your presence in your soulmate's life be as expansive and as secure as it naturally is. When you stop contracting yourself to accommodate someone else's discomfort, the very thing she fears most is not you trying harder to win her over. The very thing she fears most is you completely releasing the need for her approval and walking in the full unhurried, unashamed authority of someone who knows exactly who they are. That is your greatest power. That is your most devastating response to everything she has done. Not anger, not confrontation, not public exposure of her behavior, but the absolute, sovereign peace of someone who has heard the verdict of heaven and no longer requires the validation of earth. Because, dear soul, This is the truth that the high heavens want to seal into your bones today. The opinions of those who have chosen to see you as a joke are irrelevant. Not because you are above feeling hurt by them, but because they carry absolutely no weight in the celestial economy of your destiny. They cannot stop what has been set in motion for you. They cannot close the doors that divine favor has already opened. They cannot intercept the blessings that have been routed to your address. They cannot alter the frequency of the connection between you and your soulmate, a connection that was written before either of you drew your first breath on this earth, and that will outlast every earthly opinion ever formed about it. Think for a moment about the sheer audacity of a human being attempting to use gossip as a weapon against a soul that is protected by the full armory of heaven. Think about the futility of throwing pebbles at a palace that is fortified by divine decree. She has been exhausting herself, expending enormous amounts of emotional energy, relational capital, and spiritual currency on a campaign that was always, from the very beginning, an absolute waste. Because you were always going to be exactly who you are. Your soulmate was always going to choose exactly what they chose. And the universe was always going to deliver exactly what has been promised to you. The argument last night was not a tragedy. It was a turning point. It was the moment that the universe chose to draw the line in the physical world, to match the line that has always existed in the spiritual world. It was the moment that the invisible became visible, that the hidden became exposed, and that the relationship between your soulmate and the toxic influence of their sister's manipulation was formally and irrevocably changed. Something that needed to break has broken. Something that was rotting in the dark has been dragged into the light. And now the healing can begin, not just for you and your soulmate, but for the entire family system, which has been quietly suffering under the weight of her controlling energy, for far longer than this situation has been in play. You are the catalyst for that healing, even though you never intended to be, even though you were not present in that room last night, even though you played no active role in precipitating the confrontation. Your presence alone, the pure, steady, high-frequency presence of a soul, living in authentic alignment, was the force that cracked the foundation of her control, and now the rebuilding can happen on ground that is clean and honest and real. As you move forward from this revelation, there are some divine instructions that the higher council wishes to place directly into your hands. Walk gently with your soulmate through whatever comes next in the aftermath of that argument. They are navigating something that is genuinely painful, because no matter how clearly they see her now, no matter how righteous their anger is, she is still their sibling. And the grief of recognizing that a family member has been operating with malice is a complicated and tender grief. Be the sanctuary they need. Be the place where they do not have to perform strength, or manage emotions, or be anything other than exactly where they are. Your capacity to hold space for them in this season is one of the most profound gifts you can offer, and it will cement the foundation of your bond in ways that no external force will ever be able to shake. At the same time, hold your own emotional center with fierce intentionality. Do not allow the details of what was said about you to take up residence in your mind, as though they deserve a home there. Every time a specific insult or accusation surfaces in your thoughts, I want you to consciously and deliberately release it back into the void of irrelevance, where it belongs. You do not have to carry what was never true. You do not have to process the pain of slander, the way you would process the pain of legitimate criticism. Legitimate criticism comes from people who know you, respect you, and are invested in your growth. What she has been doing is not that. It is the noise of a wounded, fearful, and deeply unhappy person, and it deserves no more of your energy than you would give to the static on a radio channel. You have no intention of listening to. Keep your eyes on the horizon of your actual life. Keep your attention on the extraordinary love story that is unfolding between you and your soulmate. Keep your focus on the dreams, the goals, the creative visions, and the sacred purposes that have been placed in your heart by a divine intelligence that knows exactly what it is doing with your life. Let the small drama of earthly jealousy be exactly what it is, small. Let it stay exactly where it belongs, far below the altitude at which you are now being called to live. The cosmos is expanding on your behalf in this very moment. Opportunities that have been queued up in the spiritual realm, waiting for the removal of this particular obstruction, are now beginning to move into position in the physical realm. The argument last night, as painful as it was and as disruptive as its aftermath may be, cleared a significant energetic blockage that had been slowing the flow of abundance, clarity, and forward momentum in your life. Things are about to begin moving with a speed and a grace that will leave you breathless. Doors will open. Connections will align. Synchronicities will stack upon synchronicities, until you cannot possibly deny that heaven has been orchestrating every detail of your journey, with a precision and a tenderness that exceeds anything you could have planned for yourself. You are not a joke. You have never been a joke. You are a soul of extraordinary depth, power, and divine appointment, walking a path that has been specifically and intentionally designed for you by the highest intelligence in the cosmos. The people who have laughed at you, who have dismissed you, who have attempted to shrink you to a size that makes them comfortable, are not your judges. They are your testimony. They are the evidence. When you look back from the vantage point of your highest elevation, that you kept going when others tried to stop you, that you kept shining when others tried to dim you, and that you kept loving when others tried to poison you. The angels call you royalty. The celestial records name you as chosen. The divine decree, sealed in the eternal halls of light, declares that no weapon formed against you through the mouth of a jealous, small-souled, darkness-operating human being shall prosper. That decree was not issued last night in response to the argument. It was issued before you were born, and it has been in full force every single day of your life, even on the days when you could not feel it, even on the days when the evidence of the earthly plane seemed to contradict it entirely. Stand in that decree now. Stand in it fully, completely, and without a single molecule of self-doubt. Let it be the ground beneath your feet and the sky above your head. Let it be the first thing you feel when you wake, and the last thing you rest in when you sleep. Let it be the lens through which you interpret every experience, every relationship, and every door that opens or closes in the coming days. The war that was fought last night on your behalf is over. The verdict has been rendered in your favor. The decree of heaven stands, immovable and eternal, against every whispered slander, every petty gathering of jealous minds, and every attempt by the forces of low vibration to pull you down from the altitude that is your divine birthright. They called you a joke in the dark rooms of their smallness. The universe has called you royalty in the eternal halls of light. Walk accordingly. Walk with the quiet, unshakable, deeply rooted confidence of someone who has heard from heaven and knows beyond any shadow of doubt that they are loved, protected, chosen, and absolutely, irrevocably, untouchable. The noise of the earth fades, but the decree of heaven stands forever. They called you a joke, but the angels call you royalty. The small minds bicker in the dark, but your throne is waiting in the light, and the path to it has never been more clearly illuminated than it is right now. In this very moment, as these words settle into the deepest chambers of your knowing and remind you of what you have always been. Go now, dear soul, go in peace, in power, and in the unassailable certainty of your divine worth. The heavens have spoken, the verdict is final, and your story is only just beginning.